The phantom of the sinister carousel. In a remote town, there was an old amusement park known as Shadow Park. It was almost always deserted, except for one attraction that still functioned. An ancient carousel whose wooden horses had cold, lifeless eyes. Decades ago, the park was the site of a tragedy. A little girl named Sophia mysteriously disappeared during a visit with her family. She was joyfully riding one of the white horses when the carousel started to spin abnormally fast. When it finally stopped, Sophia was gone. Despite weeks of searching, her body was never found. After her disappearance, strange things began to happen. Visitors reported hearing the laughter of a child when the park was empty. Others claimed to see a small, ghostly figure darting among the horses as the carousel spun slowly. One of the most chilling stories involved a man who went to the park at night, dared by friends to ride the carousel. He mounted one of the horses, and as the ride spun, he noticed a girl sitting on the horse beside him. She was wearing a white dress, but her face was pale, lifeless. The man screamed, but no one responded. When the carousel finally stopped, he stepped off, only to find his friends frozen in terror, their faces pale. The man looked into the mirror of a nearby booth and saw behind him, smiling, the reflection of the little girl. Rumors about the girl's ghost grew, and people noticed something eerie about the carousel horses. Their once blank eyes now seemed alive, following the visitors. Late at night, even when the power was cut, the carousel sometimes began to turn on its own, emitting creaking sounds that resembled muffled laughter. A paranormal investigator, intrigued by the stories, visited the park to capture the phenomenon. When reviewing his footage, he saw something horrifying. A small child standing in the middle of the carousel, staring directly at the camera, before slowly fading into darkness. After that, no one dared to come near the park again. The Man in the House of Mirrors. In the 1990s, a traveling carnival set up in a small coastal town. Its main attraction was the famous House of Mirrors, a maze of illusions that promised to deceive the senses. However, soon stories began to surface about a strange figure haunting the reflections inside. Visitors began reporting encounters with a tall man dressed in black, with a grotesque smile and glowing eyes. No one knew if he was part of the attraction, but everyone who saw him described the same thing. His reflection appeared, yet he was nowhere to be found in the real world. The first disappearance occurred when a teenage boy entered the House of Mirrors and never came out. His friends saw him enter, and after waiting a long time, went in to look for him, but he had vanished. When the police were called, they searched the maze and found nothing but bloody handprints smeared on one of the mirrors. The next day, a visitor claimed to have seen the missing boy's reflection, his eyes pleading for help before being pulled into the shadows by that grinning man. Things took an even darker turn when one of the park employees decided to investigate after closing hours. As he wandered through the maze, he heard footsteps echoing around him, yet he was alone. When he reached the center of the house, he stopped in front of a mirror that failed to reflect him. Instead, the grinning man stared back. Panicking, the worker tried to escape, but the reflection followed him through every mirror. The next day, he was found in a state of shock, mumbling about being trapped in the mirrors, constantly looking over his shoulder as if expecting the man to reappear. After more disappearances, the House of Mirrors was torn down, but some of the mirrors were sold to collectors. In 2012, one of these pieces resurfaced at an auction, and the new owner reported seeing, late at night, a tall figure with a grotesque smile passing by in the background. She destroyed the mirror immediately. The man in the mirrors has not been seen since, but the legend of his ghostly presence still haunts the town. The cursed elevator, the tower drop, was one of the most thrilling attractions at a popular amusement park. The ride simulated a free fall of nearly 100 feet, and the lines were always packed with adrenaline seekers. But what should have been a night of fun turned into a nightmare. A violent storm hit the park one evening, and a group of 5 teenagers got onto the elevator ride just before the attraction was closed due to the weather. At first, everything seemed normal, until something terrifying happened. The lights inside the elevator began to flicker wildly, and the teenagers heard a loud metallic snap. The ride, which should have ascended smoothly, became jerky, and the elevator stopped, suspended halfway up the tower. Panicking, the teenagers tried to use their phones to call for help, but none of them worked. Little did they know they were no longer alone. One of the boys looked up and saw, at the top of the cab, a pair of glowing red eyes peering down at them. Something was up there, and the cabin was suddenly filled with the smell of sulfur. Terrified, they screamed, but no one outside could hear them. Then the fall began, but in a strange way. Instead of plummeting at high speed as it normally would, the elevator descended slowly, as if pulled down by an unseen force. Inside the cab, the shadows seemed to stretch and wrap around their bodies. One by one, they felt invisible hands tightening around their throats, stifling their screams. When the elevator finally hit the ground, the doors opened, but there was no one inside. The park closed for a few days, but reopened soon after. However, those who rode the elevator after the incident started reporting disturbing visions. Some said they saw bloodied faces pressed against the cabin windows during the ride, while others swore they heard the panicked screams of the teenagers who had perished. One visitor even left the ride with deep scratches on his arms, as if attacked by something that wasn't there. The park was sued multiple times, but the case was quickly silenced. Years later, when the ride was finally decommissioned, workers dismantling the tower found something chilling. Deep scratch marks inside the metal of the cab, as if something had desperately tried to escape. Since then, the site where the tower once stood has become forbidden ground, and some believe the spirits of those who died in that elevator still haunt the area. The echo of laughter. It was a hot summer afternoon in 1999 when the town of Lakeside, known for its famous amusement park, Lakeside Funland, was about to open its doors for the season. The park was a mecca of joy for children and families, filled with thrilling roller coasters, colorful carousels, and cotton candy stands. However, behind the vibrant and colorful facade, there was a dark story that few knew. A month before the grand opening, a tragic accident occurred at the park. A worker who was performing repairs on the old roller coaster, the plunge of panic, fell from a height of about 10 meters, resulting in his instant death. The accident was widely reported, but the park's management decided to keep the tragedy a secret to avoid scaring away visitors. On the night of the opening, a group of teenagers, including Sarah, a young thrill-seeker, decided to sneak into the park after hours. Sarah had always been fascinated by horror stories and urban legends, and when she learned about the accident, her curiosity grew. She convinced her friends, Mark, Emily, and Jake, to join her on this adventure. "Let's explore the roller coaster," Sarah suggested, her eyes shining with excitement. "No one will notice, and who knows? We might find something interesting." The friends hesitated, but Sarah's enthusiasm was contagious. With flashlights in hand and hearts racing, they ventured into the park. As they approached the roller coaster, the chilly night wind seemed to whisper old secrets. The metal structure creaked, and darkness enveloped everything like an oppressive shroud. Sarah led the group, climbing the rusty stairs that led to the boarding platform. When they reached the top, a shiver ran down their spines. The park was deserted, and the silence was unsettling. "Look at this," Jake said, pointing to the horizon. "It's even creepier up here." The view of the empty park, with its lights turned off, looked like something out of a horror movie. Without fear, Sarah decided to get into the roller coaster cars, and her friends reluctantly followed. "This is a stupid idea," Mark muttered as he settled into his seat. "We'll just stay a bit and then leave, right?" replied Sarah, smiling to ease the tension. But as soon as the group sat down, a distant sound began to echo. It was laughter from children, soft and joyful, but with a sinister edge. The atmosphere immediately shifted. The group looked around, confused. "Did you hear that?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "It's just echoes," Jake said, trying to sound confident, but his gaze betrayed his fear. "Let's get down and explore more." With a bit of reluctance, they decided to leave the roller coaster. However, as they turned to leave, a loud crash came from the platform. The group froze. "What was that?" Mark asked, his voice cracking. The laughter, now unmistakable, seemed to be getting closer. "We need to get out of here," Sarah said, starting to feel a knot in her stomach. But before they could move, the roller coaster made a deafening noise, as if it were alive. The echo of laughter turned into screams and whispers. They ran, racing through the park in search of an exit. The lights flickered frantically, and the feeling that they were being followed intensified. When they finally reached the exit, the gate was locked. "It can't be! We're trapped!" Emily shouted, pounding her fists on the gate. Desperation filled them. Sarah, determined to find a way out, began searching the area. However, as she examined it, she noticed something on the ground. It was a small, worn plaque that read, "Caution, restricted area, danger of death." A chill ran down her spine. "Let's go to the back of the park," Sarah suggested. "There must be an exit there." The group hesitated, but the fear of being trapped forced them to follow. They crossed dilapidated areas of the park, where attractions were abandoned and overgrown with weeds. The wind howled as if lamenting the loss of lives. Finally, they reached an old maintenance building. "Maybe there's an exit here," Jake said, pushing open the rusty door. To their surprise, the door creaked open, and they entered. The interior was dark and dusty, with tools scattered everywhere. As they crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind them with a bang, making them jump. "This is getting weirder," Mark whispered, looking around. "We need to get out of here." As they explored the building, they began to hear whispers coming from a dark corner. "Did you hear that?" Emily asked, looking at the others in fear. "It's just your imagination," Sarah said, trying to stay calm. But as they approached the corner, a figure appeared. It was a pale man, with hollow eyes and an expression of deep sadness. "You shouldn't be here," he said, in a soft but painful voice. "The park is not safe." The group froze, unsure if the man was a ghost or a hallucination. "What happened here?" Sarah asked, trying to understand the situation. The accident on the roller coaster," he whispered, pain evident in his voice. "No one knew. No one cared." The man's words reverberated in the group's minds. "We need to leave," Jake shouted, pulling Sarah by the hand. But as they turned to go, the door they entered slammed shut. Desperately, they began pounding on the door, but there was no way out. The pale man watched with sadness. "You can't leave. The park has trapped you. The souls of those who died here will never rest, and you have been chosen." Panic engulfed the group. The laughter of children began echoing again, louder and more distorted. The figure of the man began to fade, like a shadow dissipating in the light of day. "No! Wait!" Sarah shouted, but it was too late. The man disappeared, and the group was surrounded by shadows dancing on the walls. The laughter turned into screams of agony, and the environment became oppressive. "We're not staying here," Mark shouted, pulling the friends toward a window. With all their strength, They pushed the window open and managed to climb through. Without hesitation, they jumped onto the tall grass outside. They were out of the building, but the park seemed to have changed. The lights were off and an absolute silence hung in the air. "What was that?" Emily asked, still shaking. "We need to go now," Jake said, looking nervously behind them. As they ran toward the exit, the laughter and screams continued to echo in their heads. The park was darker than ever, and every shadow seemed to twist as if it were alive. When they finally reached the gate, it was open. "Let's go!" Sarah shouted, pulling the friends through. As soon as they crossed the gate, they felt an immense relief. The park was behind them, but the feeling of being watched didn't fade. Looking back, they caught one last glimpse of the park. The lights flickered one last time, and amidst the darkness, they could see figures of children playing, laughing, and dancing, eternally trapped in a cycle of joy and despair. In the days that followed, the group tried to ignore the experience, but the echo of laughter never left them. Sarah began to research the park and discovered that, after the accident, several other strange incidents occurred, but the park's administration always suppressed the stories. The management, worried about the park's reputation, chose to keep the place open for many years, ignoring the signs that something was wrong. In the end, Lakeside Funland was permanently closed, but the whispers and laughter of lost souls were never forgotten. Stories began to spread, and many claimed that the park was haunted, and that the echoes of children's laughter could be heard at night, reminding everyone that not all fun is innocent.